Sticky Floor Podcast. Simon,
Hello.
Callum, hi. And our newest disembodied voice this week, Kyle. How's it going, Kyle?
Not bad. How about you?
Not bad at all. Thanks for coming on.
No problem.
Before we get started, we'll do our usual bit of filler. What we've been watching this week. Simon, what have you watched this week?
I think this is my third week, maybe fourth week straight. I'm still on Riverdale. We're going strong. I don't think I've watched anything else. No, sadly not. I haven't really been swimming that much. I've been doing a lot of reading recently, so I haven't been watching too much. But yeah, that's what I've been. Still Riverdale.
Kyle, what about yourself?
As with the last several weeks, I've been watching The Man in the High Castle, and right now I'm in the third season, so I'm pretty much over halfway there.
Enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying the whole alternate history, like if Nazis won, how would everything look and how it's going, and it kind of slowly brings in a sort of sci-fi plot into it.
Yeah. Cool. Do you watch Riverdale by any chance, Kyle?
No, I do not. I tried getting into it once, but I wasn't sticking.
I highly recommend it. It's total genius. That's all I can say on it. Total genius.
What have I watched? I watched a little scene independent film from 1992 called Laws of Gravity. It's a sort of, how would I describe it? It's not got plot, but it's basically a sort of crime. It's about very, 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 very low-level criminals who don't do much with themselves, get into bother, and one of them ends up getting shot outside a pub.
Lovely.
Maybe I'll have it in the podcast one day. I also tried to watch. I started and tried to watch a David Cronenberg film called Existence. That's how it's pronounced. I watched it for about 15 minutes and I realised I'm not in the mood for this, and I stopped.
Was it by chance about existentialism?
Maybe. Well, it was sort of like, I'm not sure what it was about. I'm sure that they got to that, but I just could not be arsed.
Yeah.
I'd say it's got a bit of a video game virtual reality theme, but with a bit of David Cronenberg's body horror stuff thrown in. It's basically like Tron, but for perverts. So I'd describe
Lovely.
it. Yep. Cool.
Fascinating.
Precisely. So this week we looked at the 1975 British made-for-television film, The Naked Civil Servant, based on the memoir of Quentin Crisp by the same name. The film stars John Hurt. Plot is as follows. Life and times of Quentin Crisp, an outrageous and flamboyant homosexual coming of age and growing into old age in conservative England. And we'll go round. Simon, what did you think of The Naked Civil Servant?
I really enjoyed it. I'm still kind of processing it because I watched it again this morning. But I really enjoyed it. I liked the themes it explored and the kind of politics it explored. And I thought it was done quite well. So yeah, that's kind of my overall review.
Kyle, give us a brief summation of your thoughts.
It was very interesting. I like how it highlights how views were back in the 1920s and 30s and how they contrast to now. Like even in the film, they kind of show at the end when they catch up to the 70s and they see the difference between then and now.
Yeah. So did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Cool. I love this film. I know this is going to sound weird, but this is kind of like one of my feel-good films of choice, even though it's not actually that happy a story overall. And it's kind of much less so if you read the actual source material, which I have, which we'll talk about a bit more later. But yeah, I just think, I don't know, it's got this sense of just grabbing life by the balls and just going for it and not really, not really letting things get you down despite all of it. And it just, I don't know, it just makes me smile every time I watch it, and I really rate it.
I understand what you mean by that. Sometimes it's the slightly more grim and dour films that are actually like it's the overall message they send rather than the actual like content within it. One of my favorite films, like my feel good films, is Man Private Idaho, and anyone who's watched that knows it's quite depressing. But there's an odd comfort to it, so I understand that.
I love the way like the film teaches you just to keep going. Don't let anything drag you down. Just continue being you and don't let anything get in your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to cut in again. There's a real honesty within it, which I really respect. It doesn't kind of he doesn't pretend to be something he's not, and neither does the film.
Yeah. And there's and you kind of get more of a sense of this as well with the book. There's not really a sense of self-pity. Like he doesn't kind of wallow in his own misery. There's not a sense of wallowing in the character's own misery, you know. And like, you know, and that's why, yeah, there's not like he doesn't present himself as a victim so much as, and I suppose this is because he wrote this memoir when he was in his 60s, or when he was approaching 60 anyway, because it was published in 1968. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's just a sort of matter of, it's got a very matter of fact tone to it. So my first question is, were either of you aware of Quentin Crisp before you saw this?
The name definitely rings a bell, but I'm not entirely sure what from. Otherwise, I was not aware of him. But I am now, and I'm going to do some research on him.
Yeah.
I vaguely heard of him, like, and then I can kind of see his style was inspired other styles, like for characters and stuff you see in television today. So I can see his influence. He has had an influence in pop culture today.
Oh yeah, and like if you go on YouTube, there's like a wealth of interviews and just of or appearances or him because he had his own sort of stage show, like an audience with Quentin Crisp that toured in Britain and America. In fact, after I think either at the end of the 70s or the early 80s, he actually emigrated to America, and you know, he kind of became a bit of a minor sensation there as well, and his kind of celebrity sort of started all over again.
Yeah, he had like a talk show and all that, and then I think eventually after his death, they made a sequel about his life with John Hurt returning. So
yeah, there is a sequel called An Englishman in New York, which came out in 2009. It was an American production, I'm pretty sure, and I have to admit it's not as good as Naked Silver Servant. I haven't watched it all the way through, but I didn't enjoy it so much. But John Hurt was great in it as always. Sorry, go on, man.
There's just something about those 70s British content that, you know, really sets well. Like
yeah, I think it just comes down to, you know, just limited resources, limited budget. So they kind of, I don't know, I feel like writers and creators, that gave them more of a push to try harder and make more interesting content. And it was kind of an odd period. Like it was a kind of, you know, the 70s and suppose the 60s beforehand, it's kind of like it was society coming adjusted to sort of ideas that would have been seen as being more radical or more transgressive beforehand. And so it was an interesting time for people, for like writers, especially in television, to sort of toy with ideas. Sorry, were you saying something, Simon?
I just wanted to say, furthering that point you just made, I feel like definitely films of that time and a lot of content created at the time, there's a real reliance on writing because they didn't have, you know, the bigger budgets, especially because this is a made for television film as well. They had an even smaller budget, so you get this like really kind of raw look at it. Whereas even though I haven't seen the sequel, I can imagine that there's more of a reliance on kind of aesthetics or just using the budget for other things rather than focusing on like kind of more honest writing. I feel like we see that a lot, and if you look at how cinema is today, you can see you know, writing is like maybe fourth on the list of kind of priorities. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I actually think, even though obviously, as with most television productions, it's not too, they don't put too, especially at the time, they don't put too much emphasis on the visuals. I do actually think, like, just as a, what do you call it, as a period piece, I mean, I know it covers several decades, it works pretty well. Like, I totally, you know, I believe that was in the 30s and 40s. Like, and I like the costumes, and I like the locations, and I like the sets, and it all
Yeah, the
works.
set dressing and
did-
the kind of aesthetics of it are quite impressive, because they do a lot with quite a little, and they don't go
Mhm.
out of their way to make large flashy sets. It's all very grounded, like the story that we're
Yeah.
so it all fits in. It's yeah, it fits well into itself, which I really enjoy.
Mm. Yeah. John Hurt, what did you make of his performance, guys?
Um, I thought he was fantastic. John Hurt is a stellar performer. I haven't seen like a plethora of what he's done, but what I have seen has been all very impressive, and this is included. I think there was a real vulnerability to how he portrayed the character, but also, like you said, like a refusal for self-pity. I found it quite nuanced. The kind of performance he gave, you really like, you felt like you knew this character personally at the end. You'd gone on this journey with them, whereas sometimes in biopics, you feel like you're just watching them. You feel like you lived through what he experienced with them. And I think that's partially down to the writing, but also down to his performance and how he portrayed this man and his life. And yeah, I just thought it was brilliant.
Loved, like, see at the beginning when you see the real Quentin Crisp introducing us, and then when you see John Hurt, I'm thinking I didn't see much difference there, and I'm just like they casted that perfectly. Like the mannerisms, the accent, just everything was perfect about his performance for Quentin.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. In fact, one thing I think you should look up after this is there's like, it must have been filmed in the 80s or something. You can see a clip from a program on YouTube where John Hurt actually catches up with Quentin Crisp in his apartment in Manhattan, and they actually watch bits of The Naked Civil Servant, and they kind of comment on various bits. And so, it's kind of really interesting. Yeah, just to sort of jump off what you said, Simon, about going through his life, I'd say, having read the book now, and I mean, I don't actually, it was about 3 years ago I read it, and I borrowed it off a friend, so I don't remember too much of the details, but tonally, I'd say the film it gives a more kind of cheery, more rosy sort of depiction of the character's life. Because I mean, the thing about Quentin Crisp was he was despite his hardships and despite his martyrdom, he was actually quite a flawed person himself. He was very, I mean, I'm going to say he was pretty lazy. Like, he didn't really seem to push himself much. He didn't have much ambition.
He didn't really clean his apartment. I noticed that in the film.
Yes,
They highlighted that.
and one of his famous quotes was that, a labor-saving device for all the housewives of England is, after 4 years, the dust doesn't get any thicker.
I think that although I haven't read it, I can imagine, the laziness and the kind of refusal to kind of have like larger ambitions, it kind of stems from maybe, when you've been rejected by society, why would you conform to what it expects of you, in a way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm possibly misremembering this, but I'm sure he said in an interview that he doesn't actually regard that specific aspect of him as a result of prejudice he faced. It was just down to him, because, like, he did for the longest time view himself as a failure, just a failure at life. Like, he was most of his, and they kind of tack onto this near the end, that by the end of the film, most of his nearest and dearest friends have either went away and moved on, and he's kind of by himself again. Um, and that changed because after the film came out, because the book didn't sell so well at first, but he was interviewed for an episode of World in Action, which was like a current affairs program, and so he kind of got a bit of a reputation as a sort of a living curiosity. And then after the film came out, and then the book became a hit, and then he started doing the chat show circuit, and he was, when he just became like, Britain seems pretty well known for producing raconteurs, like storytellers, and you got people like, especially gay ones like Oscar Wilde, Kenneth Williams, and I suppose Stephen Fry you could probably put in that pantheon. In fact, if I'm remembering right, I'm sure some people have regarded Quentin Crisp as the 20th century Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, I understand where they're coming from with that.
Yeah, probably not as promiscuous as Oscar Wilde, but
Very little people were. or
Yeah.
are to this day. I mean, man
Yeah.
was a legend.
Yeah. I admit I don't know a huge amount about Oscar Wilde. But yeah, I need to. He's probably somebody I should check out.
Definitely.
Lost my train of thought there. What was I talking about? Chat. So after the film, yeah, he became a celebrity, and then he kind of decided at some point to move to America, and he became a celebrity there as well. And he made about 3 appearances on David Letterman. He actually appeared in quite a few films as well. And you know, he died in 1999, if I'm right. So he was 90. He lived all the way up to 90. Good
Yeah, it was
innings.
99. I think it was 99.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Riz, I don't know why. I often feel like if he was alive today, I could imagine him being a guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race. Like I could see that. Because
I understand what you mean. Yeah.
they tend to get the odd sort of, you get these cult queer figures who make the odd appearance in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kind of
like
more long-standing cultural. Lost the word. You know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
I did see one of his last interviews where he talks about how he might feel he actually identified as a trans woman as the starting to kind of get more into that.
Yeah.
So and he talks about how if the resources were available to him at the time, he probably would have made the transition at a much younger age.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I did read that. Although it kind of makes the film, and I mean, again, I can't remember specifically if this was talked about in the book or to what degree it was, but in the film, they kind of make this thing like he has no desire to be a woman, even if he presents himself in a very feminine way. But yeah, I do remember him saying something along the lines: if the operation had been available to him when he was young, he might very well have taken it, which is interesting. Right, I should probably talk about more what happens. So yeah, so the film starts, like you mentioned, Kyle, with a wee introduction by the real Quentin Crisp, and he talks about if he could suggest one image for the scene, then the title sequence involves him as a wee boy dancing in front of a mirror and what I'm guessing are his mum's clothes, which is a nice wee start to it.
That's what I was thinking. Like, this is just to give us the idea of what he is at the very start.
Yeah, precisely. And so, yeah, and then it picks up with John Hurt, who I'm pretty sure John Hurt was in his 30s at the time. So from what I understand, it sort of takes place by him between being 18 and being in his 70s, because it ends in 1975. No, he would be in his 60s if he was born in 1908. I'm talking rubbish.
Well, he was in art school, which I thought he wasn't in art school until his early 20s. So I thought it might have been around then.
Yeah. He actually studied to be a journalist as well, but yeah, I think he just he tried a few things, but he never really got through any of them, and so art school was kind of the last stop. So we see he's in it. So I'm not quite sure if it's done like this in the real life, but it's presented in the film that his initial realization of his own sexuality is when he meets a gay prostitute. And as he puts it, he realized that he wasn't the only one in the world. I probably think those scenes with him as his brief time as a rent boy, which according to real life was only about 6 months in Soho. I think those are some of my favorite scenes because like this film's very humorous. Like he was a very witty person, and there's a lot of funny offbeat lines in the film.
I loved the way like he talks about what not to do if somebody's following you or if the police approach you, and then you get the text on the screen detailing the key points.
Yeah. The moments of, sorry to cut you off, the moments of like stylization when he's like kind of handing out that life advice stood out to me. Like I love those kind of like, I know we have an overall narration of the film, but I feel like those moments of truly breaking the fourth wall and him addressing us directly with this kind of like, you know, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Those are some of the funniest moments, like funny wee lines like sexual intercourse is a pure substitute for masturbation, that kind of thing.
There was a one line when he was joining the army later. He said, I can't remember exactly what he said. Something about there's plenty of us to kill, or
oh yeah,
something like, I thought that was
right. And he goes, why did you want to join the army? And he says, well, anyone can get killed.
Yeah, that
anyone can die.
Yeah, what use would you be to the army?
And I'm like, that's funny.
Yeah, like that whole. I mean, he wasn't, but it almost seemed like he just went there to troll them. The way that's done.
That scene overall really stood out to me again. I loved that kind of like back and forth, especially between the what was it like psychologist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just brilliant.
Yeah. So going back to the sort of initial scenes, oh, by the way, just in case you hadn't noticed, one of the male prostitutes was played by Roger Lloyd Pack, Trigger from Only Fools and Horses, and also the father of Emily Lloyd, who starred in Wish You Were Here.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I think
that's pretty cool.
He was the one with the dark hair. Bermondsey Liz, I think he was called.
I'll have to watch it back. I'm definitely gonna rewatch this a few times.
Yeah.
There's another big actor who appears later in the film who I didn't know it was at first until I looked at the credits and I was like, oh no.
Oh, John Rhys Davies.
Yeah, he played the big guy that he was in a relationship with.
Barndor, as he's called. None of the other characters actually have names in the film, which is kind of. Yeah, sorry, Kyle.
No, I think that's more of a discretion, though. Like, if these were real people, he doesn't want to out them.
Kind of, but it also kind of plays into this whole notion that he's kind of lives a life of fantasy, and that he's the only person that's real, and everybody else. That's kind of a running theme that he kind of sees. He's the only person that's real, and everyone else is just like almost like a cog in his story in a way.
Yeah, they're all players in his life. It draws our attention to the fact that this is about him, and the people around him just so happen to be there. They're set dressing in a way to his kind of journey. And also I feel like them not having like genuine names as well also kind of brings a kind of realistic viewpoint kind of to it overall, because so often it makes you feel more familiar with them, as if you're in on the joke. You know, it's like there's a lack of formality which carries on through the film due to the fact that it's the pole and hangnail and, you know, the nun.
Yeah, formerly the art student.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you could say there's a certain degree of narcissism that, I mean, because there's that bit where he sees the art student and the pole getting off of each other, and he says, it was the first time I realized that other people existed. By seeing them.
I love that line. I love that bit. I actually like paused and rewound it when that happened, because I was like, that's just because I feel like you do get a sense that this guy is very much wrapped up in his own story and his own life, and I feel like that's something very relatable to a lot of people. We can be so consumed by our own kind of story that we forget that other people are around us, whether through just lack of awareness or just you know, like just for survival. So that line, it was the first time I realized I wasn't the only person in the world. I really loved that. I feel like it gives us a sense of who this person is, and like I understood what he meant by that, you know, because it's so easy to delude yourself.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me, I mean, it's a much more extreme example. Like, there's that line in the narration of Taxi Driver where he's talking about his own loneliness, and he says that he's God's lonely man, as if he's the most lonely person in the world. And it's like, well, no, everybody, there's millions of people who feel the way you do. Like,
there's like 7 billion of us on the planet.
But your loneliness doesn't make you special or unique.
Exactly. Yet we are so obsessed with like our own story, which I think is a very human reaction.
Yeah.
You know?
And we project it on everyone else.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, the pole, we'll get to him in a bit, but there was one wee interesting thing. When I read the book, the pole was called the Check. And I've tried to find out why, but I don't know why they made that particular change when it came to making the film.
He's called the pole, and then he's called the Check in the book, but he has like a French accent.
Yeah, his accent does not sound Polish. I mean, I don't know what a Czech. I'll admit, I haven't met many Czech people, but
it's you know, it's a tighter Eastern European accent. This is very French and romantic, and at some point, even during sorry to skip ahead, during his time in the psychiatric hospital, he speaks French. Like it's a tidbit, but it's like and I was sat there like, okay.
I haven't looked up that actor, but I'd take a guess that he was English. Like it's
Yeah, definitely.
the whole sort of thing with the pole towards the end. So the kind of pole when the nun leaves him and she goes off to be a nun and has him, what was the word, sectioned, I suppose. And she asked Quentin to go and visit him, which goes on and on for 8 years. And then the pole comes to visit him, and they end up sleeping together. It was kind of at this point where I started to maybe I maybe didn't feel this way when I watched it for the first time, but this is when I got to realize, God, he is so weak-willed. I mean, there's no implication that the guy forced himself on him. There's no, that this wasn't. But I think you don't have to have sex with a mentally ill old man. No, but why are you doing this? You don't seem to want to.
I think it's in part how old is he at that point? He's in his 40s.
Quentin,
I
yeah,
think, yeah.
40s. I
feel
think he was
like
about 50 or in his 50s.
yeah, he's turning 50.
Mhm.
I think it's to indicate the kind of abject loneliness he's going through at that point. He doesn't feel forced to do it, but it's almost not necessarily desperation, but it's edging on it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I think it's because that's like near the end of the film with the pole and the kind of psychiatric ward and all that. I feel like it's a real show of how dire life can be on your own at times, and when you're basically like everyone else is left and it's him and this guy who is like really quite mentally like debilitated at this point, and it's just the two of them. Like I feel like it really highlights how
Yeah.
low life can get when it's just you and this other person. So I feel like that was to kind of indicate that they were not so different, because they were both incredibly lonely individuals who've been left behind by their people, by their group, and it's just the two of them. I think it's more of an act of desperation than anything, just to feel something and be with someone even though he didn't necessarily want to.
Mm.
That's just my take on it, though.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Kyle, you got any thoughts on the Paul Quentin dichotomy? Dichotomy is the wrong word.
I don't know, like when he did force himself on her or him, um, it kind of gave me a sense as, was he just trying to be nice and not, avoiding breaking this guy's mental state even further by, denying him, or I don't know. Like it was a tough kind of choice.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of see a similar thing with John Rhys Davies' character. That he decides that they want when John Rhys Davies' character decides that they should have a sexual relationship, and then decides that we don't. He sort of casually just says, "If you wish," both times, as if
He says that a lot throughout the film. Like I always felt like, is Quentin just kind of the guy who just goes along with everything? At the same, he bees himself, but he also just kind of goes along with people if they ask him of this or that at times. Like the only time I ever felt like he really denied something was when his friend confessed her love to him, and then he had to try and deny, calmly deny her.
Yeah.
I think you kind of get the sense that maybe this is all just kind of like survival instinct, not necessarily so drastic as survival, but we see through his kind of like the kind of moments of like the kind of text on the screen moments. I've taken a total blank of what they're called, but you get the kind of sense that this is like out like this is this is kind of all due to just him accommodating for other people so they find comfort in what he doesn't seem to be able to have. Like he doesn't like he's kind of navigating life just trying to almost get by in a way, which contrasts his kind of more narcissistic personality. I think there's a real duality to him with it, in the kind of way he just not necessarily puts other people before himself, but is so willing to just go along with things for their kind of comfort and betterment. He doesn't really strive for anything for himself. I think that again comes to a lack of ambition. He doesn't really like he doesn't really have much drive, so he doesn't really have much sense of, do I actually want to do this, or do I just feel like I should? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the path of least resistance, and it might tie into some degree to
Yeah.
how he deals with authority figures, which is just, do exactly as they say, don't upset them, just, be polite, be this, be that, be as cooperative as you can. But yeah, and I also think it ties in, the lack of drive, the lack of purpose in his life. And I mean, even if he wasn't gay, even if he didn't have all these even if he didn't have the kind of, you know, even if there wasn't, he had this thing which was this great societal prejudice towards. I mean, the story would be kind of similar with that still lack of purpose. If you don't
Yeah,
push
you can't.
yourself, if you don't seek things out, if you don't do things with your life, you're just going to kind of end up lonely.
Yeah, you kind of
basically.
get the sense that he was always going to be this way, no matter, the kind of other struggles in his life. He doesn't have that pushing force behind him, which I kind of relate to at times. I
Oh,
think
me too as
everyone
well.
does. Just kind of a willingness to let yourself marinate in nothing and just kind of not, because I don't know how to, because he genuinely, a lot of it just comes to his lack of drive and passion. You can tell that he enjoys life to a certain extent. I don't think it's at a point of depression for him. I just think this is how he sees the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah,
sees his
definitely.
place in the world more.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you see like his earliest like televised interview, which I think was around about when the book was published in 1968, which is on YouTube, he asked them that as much as the driver says he got a sense that the book was quite depressing towards the end, and he said, I wouldn't say so much as I've depressed. It's that anybody who lives to be 60 will. It's not always never going to be happy because the way. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree with this. Based on how you live your life, but to him, like the happiest times he's had have already passed.
Yeah, it's like, I can't remember where it's from, but there's a line that kind of encompasses that, where it's like there are people that have lived like longer, fuller lives in like 20 years, and some people have in like 100. It depends how you spend those years. And he, what's the word?
Live
I'm
fast, die young.
absolutely. Yeah, that's one way of going about it. It's not. Oh, I'm taking a total blank today. My mind's apparently not on my side. It's almost as if he's already given up. Do you know what I mean? But it's not quite that. It's kind of, it'll come to me. Do you know what I mean? No, it's like he's gone, yeah, okay, this is where it's gonna go. Like, I'm not gonna like put myself again, basically just reiterating every point I've just made, but it just all comes back to his lack of drive, and that comes to his own happiness as well. He doesn't have that striving for, like, true joy all the time. He just kind of goes with the flow.
Yeah.
It's a pretty,
Kyle, sorry, go on, man.
it's a pretty relatable situation that, like, after a while you just kind of stop caring or looking for what you thought you wanted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which you shouldn't, especially at our age. Like, what I mean? We're still young. Like, it's still there, and you just kind of got.
Yeah.
And it's like everything, you just got to kind of push yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
You just gotta get yourself out of that kind of patch of
yeah,
your life, which is easier said than done, especially right now. But yeah.
yeah. Do you have any favorite lines? There's a lot of zingers in this. This is a very quotable film in my book.
the last
That is
line,
true.
well, I don't know if it was the last line because I think you said it earlier in the film as well. Never looking at anyone unless they demand I look. Never speaking unless spoken to.
And yeah,
Thought
Yeah.
something about that was very, what was it? Or it kind of reminded me of, learn to love yourself before somebody else, you love somebody else, or they take the time to love you, something like that.
Yeah.
Felt very reminiscent of that.
really, because I just took that as just don't that's just more like his survival thing, because more often than
Yeah,
not he'll be met with hostility. So don't approach people; just wait for them to speak to you. That's the best
yeah,
way.
I think it kind of en- encompasses kind of both of those kind of ideals. It is partially in survival, but also just, you know, why um why go out
The
of your way to antagonize people when you can just spend time with yourself?
especially in the time you grew up in, I'd imagine,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
just keep to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, we should probably sort of state that the way he presented, like, so how Quentin Crisp presented himself, he dyed his hair red, he wore makeup, he had his nails painted, and he wore sandals so that his painted toenails were visible. Like, as sort of stated in the film, he did this so
Yeah.
that it was to make his homosexuality abundantly clear to everyone else, with the
Yeah,
purpose that,
he's a self-identified effeminate homosexual, so that's kind of just his way of, again, being very honest about who he is and kind of just letting it out in the open.
yeah. Well, as he said that, like, if it was obvious to everyone that he came across him that he was gay, then eventually people would get used to the idea that homosexuality existed, because
Yeah, he
as he
has this
said,
kind of.
sorry, go
Sorry,
on.
continue.
Yeah, so like as he sort of said early in his book, I remember that just yeah, in the 1920s and 30s, a lot of people just didn't know that homosexuality existed, or at the very least, they didn't know anybody. You didn't know anyone who was gay. You might know someone who knew someone who knew someone, but it was something that happened somewhere else. That was the sort of view of it. And in fact, there's a line in the film where he says there are Aborigines all over the world who have no idea what homosexuality is, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
So it was kind
it
of
was
like
quite early on in the film.
his one way of, it's sort of like his purpose was to sort of raise awareness without actually, well, without getting in anyone's face, without having
Yeah,
to speak to anybody. Just his way of saying gay people exist.
yeah, passive expressiveness. You also kind of get the sense that he has this kind of martyrdom complex throughout the film, and it's addressed a few times, even explicitly through kind of visuals as well, with him modeling for the art class in the kind of crucified man manner. You get the sense that he, although isn't necessarily more involved with the politics side, he's definitely involved in the visibility of him and others, and he will, like, we see that through when he goes to the army as well. It's like, I can die as well as anyone else. You kind of get the sense that he would maybe be willing to die for the kind of, like, a more kind of visible way of what's the word just allowing people to be more visible and living their lives and being seen as people. You kind of get the sense that he does kind of have that complex, which I think is very relatable, because I feel like we often in our heads get kind of so entwined with ideals, especially when it comes to identity, that you
Oh yeah,
can then begin to believe that you would, become a martyr for the cause, even if when it came down to it, you wouldn't.
yeah.
But we kind of get the sense that he believes that he would.
Well, maybe from yeah, I was going to say, like, I'm sure maybe it was in a Letterman interview. In fact, he said that he never fought back whenever he was assaulted, because he used to get battered all the time. Like, his appearance in 1930s London, his appearance was very shocking to most people.
Yeah,
And so he would get, assaulted or accosted quite a lot. But he said he never fought back, because for the very reason, had he, then that would have pushed them over the edge, and he could have very easily been beaten to death. Like, he was very, like, it's like you said, he was very passive in his approach.
yeah. It's about a kind of more visual representation than any actual um antagonization or kind of speaking out against it. It is just him existing. Um, that is enough to kind of trigger people into that frenzy. Which I think, he's really, there's a real courage in simply just existing, um, the way he did, and I think, yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. I had a point I was going to come off of that. So there's a bit in it where he it shows that other gay men aren't so keen on him because he believes that they because his license is a what's the word? His membership from I'm guessing what is like a secret
Yeah,
gentleman
like
club, but
yeah,
it's for gay men in secret, is revoked because
he's
way
too
they say
effeminate. And
he draws
even
attention to himself.
yeah, and even in today's society, we can see that kind of rejection of more feminine um people, queer people, against the kind of like push to be seen as kind of like normal and kind of like fitting into society's like concepts of normalcy. We can see that pushback, especially in the more kind of male-sided area of the community.
But doesn't the film make the point that um, most gay men aren't effeminate? Like most gay men are unremarkable outwardly, so that he's
Unremarkable.
yeah. But you know what I mean, like unremarkable in the
Yeah,
sense that
yeah,
when compared to the majority.
yeah. Um, I've totally lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
Well, my
Um,
kind of point was that, like, I mean, because obviously, like the most visible gay TV personalities are always the more flamboyant ones. You know, your Graham
yeah,
Nortons, etc. Like, you know what I mean. So
yeah,
a lot of people think that that's their idea of what a gay man is, being very
mhm,
effeminate and over the top. And
yeah,
they are, well, as far as I understand it, I don't know if any studies have been done into this, but I assumed that like most gay men weren't, you know, effeminate or flamboyant or that kind of stereotype. It was just that, and because they don't stand out, that's why most people assume that most gay men are the other way, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
You see that in the film, like with the man he meets. Like there's that one guy that he had a sort of affair with for a bit, who remember the neighbors complain that they can see them
Oh
through the
yeah,
yeah,
window. That guy, I was thinking he's very.
yeah,
I guess the term would be straight acting is
yeah,
what he so.
yeah. He's
yeah.
very
He's like, he's straight passing. No one's gonna like look at him and assume that he is anything other than a heterosexual man, which is a kind of privilege in of itself to go under the radar, whereas more openly presenting queer individuals have always felt like had more prosecution against them, even if they're, in kind of more modern times, they are the kind of more the face of the kind of community as a whole, throughout their lives, and even as on their time as being in the public eye, it's it goes past the point of just like prosecution because they're queer, but because they're open about it and they're visibly so.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's an important distinction between that.
yeah. I mean, obviously, we have to appreciate that at the time these people were living in, you know, there would be serious repercussions for being openly homosexual. So
Yeah.
it's understandable that they wouldn't want to be open about it because, you know, oh, well, actually, you wouldn't, no, only if they were caught in the act would they actually be prosecuted for any criminal, with any criminal thing. So it wasn't
Well,
illegal to just say
oftentimes,
that you're homosexual.
yeah, but oftentimes, if the law enforcement, as we see, get a whiff of the possibility that they were homosexual, they would plant false information.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened with Alan Turing as well. Um,
I mean, who Alan Turing is?
He's
Alan
a
Turing was. Do you want to take this, Kyle?
no. You go ahead.
He was. It was the Enigma machine. He was part of the World War II
Oh yeah, the guy who
creation
Tiny
of the
Eyes
Enigma
played.
machine.
His name.
Yeah, but he's kind of like the father of modern day computing after Ada Lovelace's kind of first beginnings of the computer. He carried on her kind of manuscripts and her uh, work, and he created the Enigma machine, which helped us win the war. So he's like,
Okay.
and he's
Yeah, I
only
understand.
been pardoned recently as well, because he was prosecuted for having an illicit affair with a prostitute, and then they put him on hormones that led to his suicide, which was cyanide in an apple, which is a hell of a way to go. Um, because he was a big fan of Snow White.
Really? Wow. Didn't know that, but
Yeah, my higher computing teacher was huge. He was like Alan Turing was a huge inspiration to him, and because I had quite a good relationship with my teacher. He talked about it a lot, so I know far too much about the man.
Is the Imitation Game good?
No, it's really bad.
Really?
It's a really bad adaptation of what actually happened. Even past just historical inaccuracy, the way it's portrayed that there was only one woman on the team and she was this that's not the case. It was majority women, because it was the war, so there weren't a lot of men kicking about. It was a majority female team with Alan Turing and a handful of other men, and they worked on it, and it was a much bigger project than it was made out to seem. And Alan Turing, although a slightly odd man, was not nearly as alienized from the rest of the group as it is portrayed to be. And there's this real kind of weird dynamic between him and Keira Knightley's character, where it's like this kind of like, this like weird kind of way they portrayed the friendship as almost romantic, but like, it couldn't be that way because he was gay, and it's just it's such an odd way of navigating the story, and it's totally doesn't do justice to the amount of women involved in that project and his true genius, because he's just made to be some like a weird guy played by Benedict Cumberbatch of all people.
Kyle, have you seen the film?
I've not. I've heard of it, but I've never actually seen it. I usually like Benedict Cumberbatch too, but I'm not sure if I'll watch the film based off your review now.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say give it a watch anyway. At some points, it's got good points. Charles Dance is in it, which is always a good shout. But yeah, I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a really poor adaptation of what was going on. Yeah.
Right, well, that was our mid-episode review of The Imitation Game.
That's my mini review of The Imitation Game.
Yeah.
And also they didn't mention Ada Lovelace at all, which makes no sense because she was a huge inspiration to him. Like, I'd just like to say Ada Lovelace is the mother of computers, daughter of Lord George Byron. It all comes full circle.
Cool. Right, well, that actually offers me a wee segue into the World War II section of the plot. So it was about this time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we should, I should have mentioned earlier, he goes through periods where he's not interested in sex at all, and during the Blitz, as he puts it, at no time was so much sex had by so many people or so few people, something like that. And so he So during the blackouts, he gets picked up by a lot of American GIs who are on leave there. In fact, according to Quentin Crisp, this is what made him love America and want to move there, because he found that a lot of the American GIs were a lot more open-minded than many he'd come across, and a lot less, I suppose, what's the word?
Conservative.
Conservative, yeah, but it was more, even on a sexual level, a bit more
repressed.
Repressed,
yeah.
That's the word I meant.
I remember my mum talks a lot about what the stories her mother used to tell her about when the American GIs would come over, and they were just incredibly like open and like just openly flirtatious in a kind of like more liberal and kind of open-minded way that had never kind of been seen, especially in like Clydeside, Glasgow.
I think it's just a Navy thing. I think it's just being stuck on a boat for months and months and months. You just, once you get on shore, you just go into a mad sexual frenzy.
Shagger. But yeah, it was just a completely refreshing state of mind against this very, like, especially like where my gran had been living, this very repressed, uptight kind of, working man kind of environment, and all these like very beautiful young men were, being very flirtatious about it. So that's what that bit reminded me of. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Kyle, you're an American. You got anything to add?
No, it's funny you mentioned that, because I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for an American and my grandmother, because my step-grandfather was a Navy officer who was stationed over here. So,
during the
and
war.
then they got married. No, well, it was during the 70s.
Right.
But again, they came over here and super off their feet, and they went back there, got married, and I probably wouldn't be here today for that if it wasn't for that.
So romantic.
So I can see what you mean about the whole Americans have a different, more open-minded feel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised, but I mean, I feel like, sorry, I was shouting there a bit. I kind of feel like America is probably a little bit less secular than Britain when it comes to politics. Like, I'd say that sort of Christian morality doesn't seem to have such an effect on British politics, like, well, since before I was born, as it still has some influence in American politics. There is still that lobby. And so when sort of, especially throughout my life, when any kind of gay rights issue, whether it's marriage or anything like that's come up, that's been where the biggest pushback is in American politics, usually from the kind of conservative religious right. I mean, there obviously has been elements of like that still in Britain, but they're like smaller and smaller. So I was kind of surprised that, again, maybe it's just like I said, maybe it's just a Navy thing. Maybe it's just.
I think also our perspective as Scottish people, and not just like British English, there is a difference between how kind of English people navigate it and Scottish people. Like, it's not a huge difference, but there is one, and especially in like I'd say Scotland is quite repressed, but I would say it's not as repressed as England, and especially the kind of more like the kind of lower middle class area we see him living in, or kind of more middle class lifestyle as well. There's a kind of real uptightness about it. Whereas I feel like specifically Glaswegians are like repressed, but they're not like uptight about it. It's more of a kind of like generational thing about like kind of being in a post-industrial kind of environment rather than like a kind of stiff upper lip kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? There's like a differing kind of perspective on it. So I feel like as Scottish people, even though it's a British film, we do have a different perspective on it. So I think like I can imagine Americans being more kind of like liberal than English people, but I can't imagine like I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
You're doing well. You're doing well.
I'm so I had to get up at the crack of dawn to go out with my friend and get presents, and my brain is just mush from like actually being around people. So I apologize.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, they even make that point after the scene where he gets beaten up, where I'm pretty sure it's the Pope says, "Why don't you move to France, where you know what I mean, where you don't have to hide?" Because, yeah, that sort of like, I know it's a sort of stereotype, but there's this notion that compared to continentals, British people, or more specifically English people, are a much more emotional, a much more oppressed sexually,
it's
emotionally.
It's not a stereotype, it's the fucking truth.
It's very much the truth.
Well, someone who was born in England, I'll have you know. As a half-breed.
Mainland Europe is so much more open-minded and so much more chill about things than sunny Britain, man. Like,
well, at least we drive better over here. I'll say that.
Have you?
Debatable.
Russia,
Mediterraneans are terrible drivers.
Yeah, but it's always going to be fun.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you might run off like the volcano.
Their attitude to driving is, I need to go somewhere. Everybody, fuck off. That's how they drive.
And they get places. So, I'm not hearing any complaints, man. I think they've got a great way of living. Yeah, I feel like anyone who's like, spend any time over in the mainland, honestly, can just say that. Like, you can spend like 5 minutes there and be like, all right, okay, you guys are a lot more chill. I mean, obviously there's like, they have other problems, like it's not like some utopia, obviously, but when it comes to kind of like sexuality approach, there is a lot more kind of, I hate the word liberal, but you know what I mean, like more openness about it. I know, more open discussion about it as well.
Liberal.
Yeah, small L.
Okay. I kind of forgot we were reviewing a film. I feel like we've gone off in so many tangents. Yeah. I mean, is there anything in the film you wanted to touch on? Kyle, what have you written down?
Just going through my points. I noticed like throughout the film, he's always admiring, or well, you say he's admiring himself, but he's always looking at himself in the mirror. Like
Mm.
especially after a moment where somebody remarks his appearance, or like there's that one guy. What's his name? I got it listed here somewhere. Thumbnails. He
Yes.
constantly, criticizes his appearance.
Mm.
Even later in life, when they bump into each other briefly, he criticizes him again, and he's always looking in the mirror. So like his father at the start says like, is he admiring himself, but is he really, or is he just kind of concerned about how he's looking?
I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah, I feel like it is established that he is partially a narcissist, but I feel like the understanding of narcissism, it's not about self-love, it's about self-obsession, and that includes self-hatred. Self-hatred is a form of self-obsession because you are so engrossed in your own self, and I feel like there is a real narcissus about him with the mirror and kind of, his reflection, and we kind of get a sense that he's dreading aging because of that.
Yeah.
And because of what it means to his kind of gender performance.
Gender performance.
How he presents himself in a more effeminate way.
So like as he gets older, it become more apparent that he looks more like a man than a woman.
Yeah, it's more apparent, his more masculine features. And also just aging is terrifying, so it makes sense.
Mutton dressed as lamb.
We all fear the day we wake up and we have all these wrinkles and stuff. So that's very human. That's very relatable.
The fear of aging and the fear of time passing is like intrinsically the most human you can get. So it makes sense.
I know.
And it's that bit where he's checking his teeth out in the mirror, and he says he's been talking to his good friend who's a dentist, and the dentist has said to him, "It's not your teeth decaying, it's you." Great line. That's a great line. It's gonna haunt me forever. It's brilliant.
Still, look after your teeth, folks.
Yeah, brush twice a day, please.
Brush thrice a day.
Morning and night.
You've got more spare time. We're in lockdown.
A bit of mouthwash, bit of flossing. Keep them healthy.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you get out of that, they're just gonna go to shit.
You've literally got time to go sit in your room for an hour with mouthwash in your mouth.
Exactly.
Oh, it just sounds like it's gonna burn.
Very end scene with when it's back in the 70s, where the young boys say, give us a quid each or we'll tell that policeman you've been touching us. Queerbaiters are getting younger, as he says. The oldest one, the one that approaches him, that was what's his name? The guy from Quadrophenia.
Oh my god, I thought I recognized him.
Phil Daniels. That was Phil Daniels, 16-year-old Phil Daniels. Yeah, that's like the final line where he says, "I'm one. You can't touch me now. I'm one of the stately homos of England."
That was a great line.
Yeah, there's just loads of great wee lines like that. Like, every scene's just like, it's just such a quotable film. Like, some people quote Anchorman or fucking Scarface. I quote this film.
There are some truly fantastic lines in it. And it is like a complete joy to watch, even at the kind of darkest moments. You like it feels genuinely quite a human experience because of the kind of levity and the kind of darkness kind of like balancing each other out.
Yeah,
I think it's really quite beautiful way of portraying it. It's a really honest way of going about it, because life isn't entirely miserable or entirely joyous, and you have moments of true levity and light even in like the darkest periods of your life. Like it's a total duality, and I think it's just done excellently, especially with the kind of one-liners and everything.
Yeah, it's like the bit where him and all the other rent boys nearly get beaten up in the cafe, and then he basically tells the guy, like, "I know you're gay. See what's going on here." And the line with it, some roughs are really queer and some queers are really rough.
That line. I love that line.
That was a brilliant line.
Yeah.
It's so good. I definitely will be watching this again.
Yeah.
probably quite soon.
Yeah, I probably will.
Yeah, I was surprised to see it on Amazon because like it was a TV film instead of a film.
It's also on YouTube. I found the
Yeah,
whole thing
yeah.
on.
That's actually
Mhm.
where I first saw it, but it was in like 4 or 5 chunks on YouTube. The
As
cut they
films tend to be.
yeah, the cut they use on the Amazon Prime, which is where we watch this. I actually have I have it on DVD. It was done by Network Releasing, and it must be pretty recent because it's a lot like it's like a remastered version. Like the cut they use is like from the actual TV broadcast, so you actually see the end of part 1, part 2 bits.
Oh.
I'd never seen that before.
Because of
This
the
is kind of what
adverts.
this is what annoys me about Amazon. Like there are better prints of films, but they often just go for the cheapest one they can find.
Yeah, Amazon's a weird one because the films on it, like it's not like Netflix where even like the kind of shoddiest films are still like, they're like they are like proper movies. The stuff you find on Amazon is like the lowest dirt quality stuff you
It's
can find.
it's
Like there's some real
supermarket bargain basement, bargain
Mm.
oh
bucket.
it's total like 49p reduced stuff you find on it, which is
Films with
great.
titles like Essex Vendetta.
Literally, like there are films I have only ever seen in a Poundland bargain bin like once in my life, and I've found them on Amazon again. Like
Yeah.
there's a real duality of quality on Amazon, which
That's
is
kind of what I like about it because that's you're
yeah,
much more likely to find a hidden gem on Amazon.
yeah, exactly. Like there's a genuine variety of films. It's more like walking into a shop instead of Netflix, where it's all like medium to like it's not even highbrow. It's all just kind of consistently kind of
Yeah,
it's all watchable, but none of it's really that good.
yeah,
Especially like the Netflix own produced stuff, which is garbage, versus like even though fuck Jeff Bezos, but a lot of the times Amazon produced films are quite decent.
mm,
Like they are good. Like obviously there's a few duds in there, but overall as a production company they're pretty good. Whereas Netflix films are just god awful.
yeah. I mean, like that's the thing. It's actually quite easy to get your film put on Amazon.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
why there's so much absolute fucking rubbish on it.
absolute cack on it, which
Yeah.
is great though because it's the only place you can find the what is it, the not the veil, the layer of the white worm, you
Yes,
know
which is where I watched it, which is not on there right now, and
not
hopefully
on
it'll
there
be on.
right now, but it will be back in a couple of months knowing them. Like they
Yeah.
took Hannibal off and put it back on. That's the thing. Like when things are taken off Netflix, they're properly taken off Netflix. When things are taken off Amazon, it's only a couple of months.
Mm.
But still waiting for Supernatural to come back.
The last
As-
season's on Channel 4. For
Well, I'm only in season 6, 7,
yeah.
somewhere there. So
I was looking for my friend who was trying to rewatch them all, and I was like, I don't know, I don't watch it, but I can look into it for you. But I know of the last, I think it's the last 2 seasons are on all 4. There's
interesting.
a little bit of tidbit information.
Yep.
That's
They
Okay.
took they took Doctor Who off Netflix as well.
It's because I think
Yeah,
they
the
put it on.
license ran out after a year, I think.
Yeah, I think they put it on BritBox. I think they're putting it on
It,
BritBox now,
it
but I'm not
it's on
sure.
iPlayer. All
And
the
you can watch all of it on
yeah
iPlayer. So
2005 to now, so that's fine. But yeah,
Okay. I think we better wrap this up. So just get
that's
your
a good
final
idea.
thoughts, guys. Kyle, anything to add that we haven't said already?
No, I mean, it was a very fascinating film. I have to admit, like, it just stood out from a lot of things you see today. And
Mhm.
like I mean, I'm kind of interested in delving more into Quentin's life a little bit. So I probably will start, looking more about, what happens after. Might even watch the sequel just to get a little insight on what happened later. But I would definitely recommend this film to anybody.
Simon?
Yeah.
This will definitely be.
Oh, sorry.
No, Kyle, continue.
No, this will definitely be one I introduced to my mom because she's been loving stuff like involving gay icons and that lately. So I'm thinking, well, here's one.
One more. I thought it was a genuine joy to watch. Like I've said a few times now, I'm definitely going to be rewatching it pretty soon. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was like truly beautifully honest portrayal of someone's life, a real kind of vulnerable and raw take on it, while also being like not too heavy at times. That are like, again, the dichotomy between the kind of like low lows and the high highs mixed in with kind of moments of true genuine human connection and reality. I just thought it was a brilliant film. Another just kind of British made for TV gem. Yeah, and I'm probably gonna get some books by him or whatever and do some research, because he seems like a genuinely fascinating figure in history. Yeah.
Yeah, like read the book. Like, I mean, you probably there's lots of copies on Amazon or any other, like you can buy it
I'll
online for
probably
pretty
find it
dirt.
on like World of Books for £2.
Exactly, and it's not too thick either, so you could read it in like a
Yeah.
week easily.
Yeah.
Um,
Once I get through the newest pile, I'll definitely get it.
yeah, like I think this film's just a joy to watch. It's fun, it's very witty, it's very moving. It's just a great piece of, well, television and filmmaking. Like, and kind of introduced me to a really interesting and a sort of boundlessly entertaining character. Like, there's like a page on Facebook, I'm pretty sure it's Quentin Crisp Archives, which I follow, so I can get a funny quote from him every day. So yeah, he always brings a smile to my face.
Aw.
Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. This was Sticky Four Podcast. Don't know what episode, but coming. Kyle, thanks again for coming on such short notice.
Yeah,
No
thank
problem.
you.
Hope to have you on very soon.
That'd be good. And I'd like to come back. So
Yeah,
Fantastic.
definitely. So see you later, folks.
Bye.
all right.